Welcome back to A Slice of News, where I cut you off a slice of news. An ICE agent in Minneapolis shot and killed 37-year-old Renee Good in what he claims was an act of self-defense, an event that was caught on video by people on the scene and then immediately posted onto the internet for everyone to see. Almost as soon as the videos went up came the defenses. People saying it looked to them like she was trying to run him over and he was entirely within his right to fire upon her, feeling that his life was threatened. If she just complied, it wouldn't have happened. Homeland Security Kristi Noem even said that she had weaponized her car and that therefore it was a domestic terrorist attack. Voices on the right said anything they could to justify what was effectively a state-sanctioned murder of an unarmed civilian by a law enforcement officer. The president himself was quick to call her a professional agitator and blamed the radical left movement of violence and hate for the shooting. Despite the fact that it was an event documented from multiple angles by multiple witnesses on the scene as it happened, they were all very quick to jump to the conclusion that the mother of three essentially deserved to die, and the ICE agent essentially did what he had to in the course of his duty, and essentially did nothing wrong. And I think that's one of the most disturbing parts of this event. Not just that ICE agents murdered a woman in broad daylight in front of many witnesses, is that so many could see the footage of this event, could see the multiple angles, could see it played in slow motion, and still come to the conclusion that actually the victim here was the ICE agent, and her death was entirely the result of her own action, that she'd run over the ICE agent so that he had to shoot her, despite the fact that the footage itself does not show that. A rewriting of their perceived reality in real time. Conscious choice to see something that was not there, purely to justify something they already believed, which was that Renee Good was the one in the wrong and her death was not only acceptable, but justified. An attitude like that can only result in more needless deaths like this one. It's revealed just how many people want this kind of thing to happen, or at the very least are completely fine with it happening. But I suppose it comes a little bit less surprising when you take into account that this happened only a few miles away from the site where 5 years ago a police officer murdered George Floyd, and their mind law enforcement is perfectly justified in killing their enemies, and they have absolutely no problem with it. At least in the case of George Floyd, you could blame racism. George Floyd was, of course, a black man, and the officer who killed him was a white man, but that wasn't the case here. Both the victim and perpetrator were both white. And if it weren't for the fact that it was so well documented, it would have been far too easy for those pushing the narrative that she was in fact the victimizer to do so, because there would be no evidence to the contrary. If I said that she forced their hand and had no choice but to use deadly force, nobody could debate that. But as it stands, we have a ton of visual evidence that would contradict that claim and show that it was absolutely an unjustified killing of an unarmed mother of three. If there's anything that's justified, it's not the killing itself, it's the outrage at the killing. It's at the fact those at the top have essentially said what happened there was completely fine, and if ICE wants to do it again, they can. They're essentially being told that they can kill at their leisure, and the government has their back. If that doesn't scare you, it really should. America's not supposed to be a place where armed thugs can simply kill people in the middle of the street, in the middle of the day, simply because they feel like their life might have been threatened. Something like that would go against our so-called American values, which is why the right was so quick to say, oh, this wasn't the killing of an unarmed civilian, it was the taking down of a domestic terrorist. She wasn't just a wife and mother, she was a leftist agitator who tried to kill a brave immigration enforcement agent, using her car as a weapon. From what I could see, the only person who was a terrorist in that situation was the masked man with a gun who approached an unarmed woman in her car. There was absolutely an active domestic terrorist on that footage, but Renee Good was not the instigator. She was the victim of terrorism. And it's this immediate desire to dehumanize the victim and to paint them as somehow the one at fault, even when the evidence very much says the opposite, is incredibly alarming. If we had ever wondered how 1930s Germany ended with death camps, we need not wonder any longer. We are seeing it in real time. Living proof that, as the famous quote said, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. People can be okay with masked, armed men killing their fellow Americans. It really begs the question of what else will they be okay with? And where's the line? Or is there even a line left anymore? Is not immediately complying to a masked man with a gun at your window enough justification to end your life? because Renee Good absolutely did not deserve to die. But in essence, that's all she did. Her only crime was not doing what the scary masked man with a gun told her to do. She feared for her life and sadly lost it as a result. This acceptance, or in some cases actually active encouragement for this killing, is particularly infuriating because I know if the roles were somehow reversed, that is not the attitude they would take. If it was one of their own, somehow taken out by a supposedly liberal law enforcement officer, they would be decrying them immediately and saying they should be sent to prison and not even need a trial. Just send them right to prison forever because they are a murderer. Seemingly in their mind, the only difference between a justified killing and an outright murder is political allegiance, if you're on their side or not. Those not on the right were, I think, understandably horrified by this essentially state-sanctioned murder. The mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, said that it was reckless use of lethal force. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said it was totally avoidable. And I think anyone who actually saw the footage and saw the truth instead of what they chose to see would agree with that. It did not have to happen, but it did. The fact that so many were so quick to rationalize and explain away the killing virtually guarantees that Renee Good was far from the last time ICE agents will kill with impunity. And it's becoming alarmingly evident that's exactly what they want. Comply or die. I want to say I don't know where this is going to end, but I actually have a pretty good idea how it's going to end because we have historical precedent for it. And that scares me very much because there is no good that can come from this. To many on the right, Renee Good was not a mother and a spouse. She wasn't a person. She was just some criminal, some agitator who had to be put down. And that's exactly the kind of rhetoric we saw coming out of Germany in the 1930s. Once you just reduce them to being part of the enemy group, killing them becomes not only easy, but justifiable, acceptable, and then it's not a far leap to then decide it's necessary. It seems both scary and sad that we fought a whole war against the people that we said were performing acts and had attitudes that were un-American, were unconscionable, that simply were not what America was about. And now we are echoing them and saying not only are they acceptable, but that's exactly what America's about. We are slowly, or maybe not even that slowly, becoming the enemy that we fought back then. If they can see a masked man murder an unarmed woman in her car and say, well, she deserved it, she shouldn't have tried to stop him in the first place, it seems it won't be long before they decide every so-called leftist is a domestic terrorist and can be shot and killed at the slightest perceived justification. I'd always said I loved my country and was glad that I was born here instead of anywhere else, but right now it's very hard to love this country and feel safe in it. If this is the kind of thing that can happen, and people just say, yeah, that's fine. The reality is it's anything but fine. And I'm greatly disheartened by the fact that the perpetrator, the man who shot her, will likely never be brought to justice because the government has said it was completely justified and okay, and we do not want to prosecute him for this act. At this rate, it feels like no exaggeration to say we are slowly living in a police state where you either obey or your life may be forfeit. And that's not this country. That's not America. That's not the ideals that we were founded upon. That's almost literally the attitude that we fought a war of independence to get away from. But much like many sons are doomed to become their fathers, it seems we, America, have become our father, the colonialist, imperialist, empire nation led by a mad king. It feels like we're living in a nightmare and I cannot wait to wake up. But I know I won't because I'm not dreaming and this is reality. This is the real life that we are living in and there is no escape. The murder of Renee Good was a tragedy and anyone who does not see it either as a murder or as a tragedy unquestionably on the wrong side. It was an awful event that should not be repeated, but I know that it won't be long before it is. Much like how in this country when there's a school shooting, the question is not how could this happen, but how long before the next one. And in both cases, the answer is not long. This should not be our lived reality. This is not the world, the country we should want to live in. We should not be encouraging a climate of fear where a masked man with a gun is seen as the hero, and the killings he does marked as simply what had to be done. We've become the villain, something we're going to have to grapple with. I would say those who support this killing should be ashamed, but it's clear that they are beyond that. They cannot feel shame because they feel that what they witnessed there was a justified killing and there's nothing that can change their mind. It's frightening to think these people live among us, that they always have, and they've only been waiting for their opportunity. Renee Good was a good person and didn't deserve to be murdered by a man with a mask and a gun, no matter how much the right vilifies her or justifies her killing. When this is all over, we should definitely remember her and honor her for the person she was, not just as the victim of a mindset that should never have been allowed to take root in this country, because it goes against everything we profess to believe in as a country. I may no longer be able to say that's not who we are, but at the very least I can say that's not who we should continue to be. We can go back to an America that we can all feel proud to be a part of. That's my hope anyway. Alright guys, that'll be it for this episode of A Slice of News. I've been your host, Mr. Slice, and until next time, when I cut you off, another Slice of News. And don't forget to rate and review the show on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.